Hello everyone, and this is BioPhoenix here, and as you would expect, I am going to be taking a look at a PS1 game here, and that happens to be Cybernetic Empire, and it was developed by Wolf Team and published by Telenet, and it was released only in Japan in the year 1999, and it happens to be considered as a action-adventure with third-person shooting. And just by looking at the game, it kind of reminds me of like a mixture between Winback and Fear Effect. Mostly Winback with the way how it looks, and then also with Fear Effect for the setting, and also just for the basic gameplay. But now, let's talk about the game's story, and I can't say a whole lot about it, but this is what I understood from it. So it's the year 2031, and there is an ancient artifact called the Cube. And no, not the movie The Cube, or even the one in Hellraiser, or even the GameCube, just your regular ass, everyday, The Cube. So apparently this cube was discovered in Russia, and there is a group of terrorists called Black Mask ends up getting a hold of the cube, and now they want to use it to rule the world. And I have to mention, isn't it kind of strange that the terrorist group is called Black Mask, you know, like the Batman villain? Yeah, just imagine him with all the mighty power of the cube. Man, I think we'd be fucked. Well, something out there has to put a stop to this, or else we wouldn't really have a game going on here, but that something happens to be the UNSK, United Nations Security Keeper, and the main characters that belong in this group are Max and Nina. The rest of them, I have no idea what the hell their names are. So that pretty much sums up everything you need to know. So for these two main characters, you actually use them in certain missions. Most of the game you're going to take control of Max, but you do use Nina quite a few times. So now let's get moving on to the game's gameplay. So the gameplay here is a lot like Fear Effect and Tomb Raider. So you run around, you shoot things, you can jump all over the place, you can pick up many different weapons and bombs. And the game is stage-based, so meaning that it is pretty linear. And one thing that is really helpful, especially if you're like me who can't read Japanese, is that the map can actually tell you where you're supposed to go. And I'm not complaining one bit, because if it wasn't like that, I think I might have been screwed at certain parts. But I will mention one part that did have me stuck for a little bit, where the map couldn't help me out. On the train level, there's these black cylinder looking things that open up. I have no idea what the hell they're supposed to be, but what you're supposed to do is that you have to blow them up all at the same time by dropping a bunch of landmines and shooting at them. And for those of you that want to try this game out for yourselves, at least now you know what to do at this part. And you won't be wasting 30 minutes just jerking off looking at these pieces of shit. So yeah, this game may seem like a typical action-adventure game at the time, but one thing that is really unique about it is that you actually do get a grappling hook sort of thing. Well, obviously it's not a grappling hook, it's actually an orb that you just throw around, and you can actually magnetic yourself towards it, and it's used for getting yourself to places that you can't reach. So that's pretty interesting that you get that into the mix, but the only two downsides is that, firstly, you can't aim down with it. It's not like you really need to throw the orb down, but it's still kind of weird that you can't do it. But that's a minor downside, but as for the major downside, well, that would be the fact that it has a really piss-poor range. So it's really tough to figure out what are the good spots that you can get yourself up onto a higher ledge. For that, sometimes you just throw an orb up into a ledge and you gravitate yourself towards it, you're just not gonna make it. Or sometimes you can even go like flying all over the place, it's crazy. And speaking of crazy shit, apparently this main character, Max, is such a badass that he can actually take out a Metal Gear with a pistol. Yeah. But anyways, moving right along, now let's start talking about the game's controls. And the controls in this game are very strange. So you walk around with the D-pad, and by the way, this actually has like tank controls, so that's something you gotta keep in mind. X is to jump, circle is to pull out your gun and shoot, square is your action button, but you can also use it to hold down and run. Triangle can also be used to run. L2 allows you to turn yourself around directly, and holding R2 allows you to throw the gravitating orb thingy, and then while you have the orb out, holding R1 allows you to gravitate towards it. Now, how does that new feature feel? Well, it's kinda jank for that not only did I already mention with the range is not very long, but also aiming with it is just really slow. And speaking of aiming, you really can't aim for shit in this game. The only way you're ever really gonna kill any of the enemies is if you just press circle when you're right in front of them, it'll just lock onto them directly. But if you try and pull out your gun first without locking onto them, yeah, good luck. Though I have to say, it is kind of cool that you can actually hold square with the gun out and you can actually like run around, so it does make it a little easier, but it's still not really the best gun control. I mean, 2 Resident Evil games came out before this and they actually had a lot better gun control than this game, and they all have tank controls. So trying to get used to the button layout in this game does take a lot of time. And whenever you gotta do some platforming like Tomb Raider style, then yeah, this is where the game can get really frustrating. So overall, the controls in this game have not really aged the greatest. I mean, even if you played this game back then, it would still feel a little off, I'm sure. Because there was many other games that came out before this with like the tank controls and like the shooting and whatnot that actually didn't have this many issues. And in 1999, you'd think they would have at least gotten it a little better. So now, let's get moving on to the other things, like the graphics. And the graphics for this game are alright for the time. Now, granted, yes, I'm talking about for the time it came out. But there is some things about it, though, that are very, very low budget, even for back then. But firstly, I gotta talk about the good. So, I actually do like the game's setting. I think it looks really great. And the character designs are not too bad, even though it does remind me more of Winback. But I mean, I'm not gonna complain about that. But yeah, I do like the character designs for the most part. And even some of the enemy designs are pretty cool too. And there is some little details to the levels that are pretty cool looking. For an example, in this level as Nina, you can actually see a half human, half Terminator. Like, holy shit. But as for the one thing about the graphics that I don't like has to be the cutscenes. Now, obviously, yeah, I know these graphics look like shit compared to today's standards, but that's not my problem with it at all. But my problem is that these cutscenes, they barely animate. So, usually for like the first few seconds of these cutscenes, they'll like move around and whatnot, but then you'll be looking at like a still image, still with like the 3D looking crap, but with the voices are still continuing. You know what this reminds me of, and I can't believe I'm making this comparison, but it kind of reminds me of Plumbers Don't Wear Ties, where, you know, they filmed everything for that game, but then when they put the film into the game, like, it was just a slideshow with, like, voiceovers. This really isn't any different, other than that this isn't, like, a live action thing, this is just all CG looking. But yeah, the fact that I had to compare this game to Plumbers Don't Wear Ties, that's not a good sign. But other than that one low budget as shit issue, I think the graphics are alright. Nothing great, but nothing terrible. And now, as for the game's music, to be honest, the music in this game kinda sucks. If there is anything nice I get to say about this, is that at least the songs actually do fit with the settings and whatnot, but the problem is that, like, it's just really bland. Like, there's no catchy tunes in the game, and all the songs, like, you're gonna hear them, like, over and over and over again, and to make matters worse, there's actually a few songs that actually sound very similar to other songs, so it just blends in together, and it just sounds really bad and unmemorable. There's really no other way to put it, but out of all these cyberpunk-related games that I've played, out of their musics, I'd say this one is probably the worst that I've played. But before we get too depressing about the music, there is one good thing I get to say about the intro theme. It's actually pretty kick-ass. In fact, it's actually a song called Freeze by the band Wands. And in case you're not familiar with the band Wands, if you've seen the Yu-Gi-Oh! Season 0 movie, they actually did the ending theme, which I also really liked. So thankfully for the intro song, they didn't fuck it up. And now, as for the game's voice acting, well, it's only in Japanese, so I can't really say a whole lot about it though, but there is actually 2 things about it that I did find kind of interesting, is that the voice actor for Dio from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure and the voice actor for Solid Snake are both in here, so that's actually pretty awesome. But I can't say if the quality is good, since, you know, voice direction in Japanese is one of those things that's just really hard to tell for someone that just doesn't speak Japanese at all. I'm sure it is good, but then again, there's always that odd chance that you can have like a fantastic cast of voice actors, but the direction is like really shitty. So moving right along, if you wanted to go out and buy this game, now like I always say with PS1 games that are only released in Japan, is that if you do want to buy them to play them, you have to make sure you have a way to actually play them. And I only seen 3 copies, and the cheapest one is going for $13, and the highest one is going for $22.99. But weird thing is, though, I actually found more copies of the guidebook than the actual game, so that's kind of funny. But yeah, if you do want to buy this one out of the 3 that I'm seeing, at least it is very affordable, and you're not going to have to, like, sell your blood to a vampire. So now, as for my overall thoughts on Cybernetic Empire is that, well, despite the fact that this game has a pretty badass name, the game is just not really good for its kind. But to its credit though, and something I can appreciate, is that it did do a few things that were kinda interesting. Like the grappling magnetic orb thingy, I don't know what the hell you want to call it, but I thought the concept of having that in a game like this was actually pretty fascinating. Yeah, it didn't work as great as I kind of hoped, but you know, it was an interesting starting point. And the level design and the way how it all looks I thought was pretty good as well. But everything else though was just a little underwhelming. So there's quite a few moments in this game that are really tedious, mostly trying to get that fucking orb thingy to work. And the platforming in this game is also very frustrating, like I mentioned before. And the camera angles are really not that good sometimes. And one really annoying thing that I didn't mention is that you have these little like laser censored bombs and you can't shoot at them. Like if you pull out your gun, it doesn't lock onto them, and no, you can't aim down because, you know, that just doesn't work. I've thrown grenades, I've used like other weapons on them, and nothing. So knowing this, just don't bother with them, just try to avoid them as best as you can, but some of them are very, very tough to avoid. But probably the funniest thing that does come out of this though is that when you do get hit by any of these lasers and there's like a whole bunch of them, your body will go like flying around, and then like if you hit the other laser, then your body will go flying again. It's quite hilarious and it was very entertaining. And sadly, that was actually the most fun I had playing this game, was watching my body go flying around by getting exploded. But really though, if you really want to play a game that's fun, that has like the same concept of flying around by explosions, you might as well play the PS3 game Pain, for anyone that remembers that game. But yeah, overall, the game is just not very good, but as an adventure game on PS1, it's not the worst that I've ever played, but it's definitely not something I would recommend. But if I had the choice to play Cybernetic Empire or Cyberknight on Super Nintendo, well, I'd pick this over Cyberknight any day. And it's a real shame that Wolf Team just didn't get it together with this one, because I really do like a lot of their games. In fact, this game was actually made after when a lot of their team members left and formed the company Tri-Ace. Well, at least around when this game came out, they were pumping out some Tales of games, so at least there's that. But anyways, that'll be the end of this review, so thanks for watching and commenting, and have yourselves a great day.